I've always been quiet. For as long as I can remember, silence has felt like my natural language, soft, steady, familiar. While others filled rooms with laughter and stories, I filled mine with thoughts. Thoughts that never seemed to find their way out. When I was a child, teachers used to tell my parents, "He's very polite, but he doesn't talk much." They said it with a smile, but it always sounded like a warning. I wasn't shy because I was scared. I was quiet because the world moved too fast for me to keep up. At school, every sound felt amplified. The scraping of chairs, the tapping of pencils, the chatter of friends who seemed to know exactly what to say. I'd watch them from my corner seat, wondering how they made it look so easy. Sometimes I rehearsed entire conversations in my mind, word by word, sentence by sentence, but by the time I was ready to speak, the moment had already passed. It wasn't loneliness that hurt. It was invisibility. People saw me, but they didn't see me. I was the boy who smiled politely, who nodded in agreement, who stayed out of trouble. But inside my mind, there was a storm, colors, sounds, memories, ideas, emotions, all swirling together in silence. At home, I'd escape into my own world. Books became my closest friends. They spoke to me without expecting a response. I would lie on the floor and read for hours, letting my imagination build worlds where quiet people were heroes, where silence was not strange but powerful. I often sat by my bedroom window and watched the rain fall, listening to its rhythm. That sound, gentle, endless, pure, felt like home. In the rain, I found something that understood me. It didn't demand attention. It just existed, quietly, beautifully. I didn't know it then, but that love for quietness would shape everything about who I became. As I grew older, silence began to feel heavier. In childhood, it was comfort. But in adulthood, it became a question mark, something people wanted me to fix. Why don't you talk more? Are you okay? You should be more confident. Those words followed me everywhere, like echoes I couldn't escape. The more people asked, the smaller I felt. In college, group projects were my nightmare. Everyone wanted quick decisions, fast voices, loud enthusiasm. I had ideas, sometimes better ones, but I didn't know how to cut into the noise. By the time I gathered the courage to speak, someone else had already moved on. So I became the quiet worker. The one who stayed late, polished every detail, made sure everything worked, but rarely got credit for it. There were days when I'd go home exhausted, not from what I did, but from pretending to be something I wasn't. I would stare at the ceiling, replaying conversations, wishing I had said more, or at least something. I began to feel trapped in my own mind. When I walked across campus, I'd keep my headphones in, not always listening to music, but pretending to. It was my shield, my way of saying, "I'm fine, don't talk to me," without having to explain. But the truth was, I did want to connect. I wanted friends. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be understood. I just didn't know how to start. The silence that once protected me was now isolating me. And yet, I couldn't let it go. It was both my armor and my prison. Sometimes, I wondered if I was broken. If being quiet meant I was missing something essential, the spark that made people shine in crowds. I didn't know then that there was nothing wrong with me. I just hadn't found the right space to exist as myself. It happened on a Thursday night. I remember because I almost didn't go out. A friend had invited me to a small open mic event downtown. It was the kind of place where people read poetry, sang songs, or told stories. I planned to just listen. That was my comfort zone. But when I got there, something felt different. The cafe was warm, dimly lit, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the scent of coffee. There was a tiny stage at the front, a microphone, and a single stool under a spotlight. People took turns sharing pieces of their hearts. Poems about love, stories about pain, laughter in between. I sat there, quietly, feeling something stir inside me. Then the host said, "Anyone else want to share?" And somehow I raised my hand. When I stood up, my palms were sweaty, my heart was pounding, and my mind screamed, "What are you doing?" But I walked to the stage anyway. I didn't have anything prepared. So I just spoke. I talked about silence, about how it felt to live in a world that rewards noise, about how being quiet doesn't mean being empty. It means listening deeply, feeling fully. First, my voice trembled, but as I kept going, something shifted. The room became still. People weren't scrolling their phones or whispering. They were listening, really listening. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then, applause. Not the loud kind, the gentle kind, like they understood. That night changed everything. I realized that even the quietest voice can fill a room if it speaks truth. After that night, I began writing every day. Not for others at first, but for myself. I wrote about moments, people, emotions, the tiny details that others overlooked. The way sunlight touched a table. The nervous laughter before a confession. The silence between two people who understand each other without words. Writing became my second voice. It was safe, steady, honest. People started reading what I wrote. They told me it made them feel seen, understood, comforted. Some even said it helped them accept their own quietness. That was the moment I realized my silence wasn't a curse. It was my perspective, my way of seeing the world differently. I began to notice that being introverted wasn't about fear, it was about depth. I didn't need 100 conversations. I just needed one that was real. I started giving small talks, sharing my writing at events. Each time I stood before a microphone, I was still nervous. But instead of hiding it, I let it live in my words. My voice shook sometimes, but that tremor made it human. The world didn't suddenly become easier. Crowds still tired me, noise still overwhelmed me. But now I understood that it was okay, because I didn't have to change who I was to belong. Now, years later, I still consider myself an introvert. I still prefer quiet mornings to loud parties. I still recharge alone. I still find beauty in small things. A cup of coffee, the sound of wind through trees, a single ray of sunlight on a rainy day. But I'm no longer ashamed of it. I've learned that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. It means being reflective. I've learned that the people who listen often understand more than those who speak. Sometimes, I sit in front of a microphone and record stories about life, fear, hope, love, and silence. When I speak, I imagine that somewhere, someone who feels like I once did, invisible, different, small, might hear me and realize they're not alone. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's a space where the world slows down just enough to let you breathe. And maybe that's what I've been searching for all along. Not a louder voice, but a quieter peace.